saying it's an easy ride, because real estate, is for investors, brokers, anyone who's in it. It is cyclical. It is not a straight line that no matter what you are up. You just have to look at the state of the market right now in the US. There are massive players that are foreclosing on properties right now. Yeah. So because you own real estate or that you have made it as a broker, that's it. Like you're safe forever. Absolutely not. It's a continuous game.
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec. And today I am very pleased and honored to have Aline Zafirian, who's in Quebec, who's based in Montreal, on the show today. So hi, Aline, how are you doing?
I'm great, Axel. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Before we jump into it, I just want to remind everyone, thank you for your continued support. I'm always looking for feedback and ideas of topics and guests to have on. So if you have someone in mind or a topic you'd particularly like to know about, please send me a message on the different social media channels. I'll be more than happy to take that and share this episode with a friend who could benefit from this conversation, because it helps us reach more people just like yourself. Today, Aline, so first of all, how in the world did you get started within the real estate world?
I started in 2014. I remember I was in Florida at the time. I was going through a bit of a difficult period in my career and in my life. And I was always looking for opportunities to become an entrepreneur. And I was looking into a franchisee opportunity. And someone said to me, I said, how do you find your locations? And he says, well, we work with commercial real estate brokers. And I said, commercial real estate brokers. And this is the extent of what I knew in real estate, which was nothing, especially commercial. Other than buying a condo for myself to live, that's what I knew about real estate. And he says, we work with commercial brokers. And my career had been in sales in the corporate world. So to me, a real estate broker was someone who was an employee that worked for a company that owned real estate, and they were a sales rep.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize there was a brokerage for commercial. I knew residential, signs everywhere. I knew that. So this is how far we go, in terms of my knowledge of this industry. And he said that, and I said, oh, wow, interesting. And I was in Florida, and I Googled, commercial real estate license, and found out.
How the hell do I get into this?
Found out that you go to the Collège Immobilier and you do this part-time while you're working, and in 8 months later you go write your exam, and it'll cost you $5,000. That was at the time, and then you'll be a commercial real estate broker. And I thought, okay, there you go. This is my ticket to two things: to commercial, being an entrepreneur and working for myself, and also getting myself out of the biggest mess financially that I had gotten myself into in my early career through investing with someone that I trusted implicitly at the time, but that guided me, misguided me, and guided a lot of other people in a bad direction, which turned very sour. And I was heading in 2014, I knew that by 2015, I was heading for a brick wall that was called bankruptcy because of this investment.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I said,
so where did you take it from there? I mean, where did you start to invest your time at the beginning?
Well, I still had a job at the time. So I did my course, did my job. And in December 2014, passed the exam. And my boss at the time knew I was doing my course. And then when they found out through the grapevine that I had passed and I had the exam, we came back in January, and they're like, you're going to start doing this. You're not going to be as present. So we agreed that after a month I would leave. And I just jumped with no parachute, thinking, oh, no problem. I was in sales all my life. I'm going to, make a sale, big sale, whatever it was. I wasn't really concerned. And I thought, no problem, I got this. And I signed up with KW. in Beaconsfield. I had interviewed with a few commercial firms, but again, I wanted to work for myself, and I felt like in the big commercial boxes, I wouldn't be able to build my brand and have, you know, more sense of entrepreneurship. So I went for a less conventional route for commercial, and it wasn't an easy one, that's for sure, because I didn't have the resources, the guidance as much as if I had joined one of the big commercial firms, right? But again, I had to get myself out of a financial situation which was going to be a really, really big hole. And I said, I need to put as much effort into, you know, rebuilding myself financially.
Mhm.
And this is the way that I thought was the best route at the time.
Makes sense. And so, did you, on top of the Collège Club Immobilier, did you take any courses? Like, what was your education like at the time?
Well, I mean, I have a BCom in finance and marketing. So that was the other thing. I said, I'm not going back to university. I'm not going
No.
to go learn like a whole new, you know, profession as a notary, for instance, or a lawyer, even though if there's one thing I would have done differently at HSC is I would have taken some law courses. But I did finance and marketing. And no, I mean, you know, I jumped into this and I knew one commercial broker, and what was fortunate in my case is that I had sales background. So
Hmm.
my background had been 20 years, or at the time 15, of doing corporate sales. I had worked for Rogers. I had worked for major corporations in the major account area. So my clients were big corporations. I had negotiated with C-levels, which is why I selected commercial. I mean, I selected commercial because I wanted to bet big. There's no doubt about that because of my
Yeah.
financial situation. But I also like the conversation, the business conversation, the understanding how we can create value and all that. That was key. Now, what I didn't know is within the commercial world, what would I like? There's industrial, there's retail, there's office, and there's multifamily. And I was very fortunate. I was picked in the office because we were a very, very small group of individuals that did commercial to be introduced to an investor who today, and funny enough, I was at his house with his kids and his wife yesterday, just, you know, playing around after dinner and watching the kids play. I would have never
Became a
guessed.
friend.
Became a great dear friend.
Hmm.
And so what happened is he walked into that room, and he wasn't starting. He had a lot of experience in real estate, but he wasn't who he is today. He is a prominent, huge developer that does some great work across the country. And but he had the attitude of this is who I am. And so he came into the room and he said, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I need. It was in student housing, and he was looking specifically for the McGill Ghetto or Shaughnessy, Plateau, anything that was really close to the universities. And I had business development experience. And I said, look, this is my ticket to putting all my eggs in this basket. And I did. I prospected, I sent letters, I door knocked, I was all over the place to develop for him. And we did. I think I met him in September of 2015, and by June 2016, we were under contract on a 32 unit in Shaughnessy, the heart of Concordia University ghetto. And it was my first real deal was $7.5 million.
Good job. Good job.
Now
So then,
it's not all roses though. I say these numbers, but that doesn't mean it's all that easy. Yeah.
no, of course, nothing comes easily. If it comes easily, something's wrong.
Yeah.
So where'd you take it from there? Like, you clearly developed a good relationship with him, and that was kind of it propelled you forward going into bigger deals. What happened next?
Well, what happened next was it was indeed a roller coaster. I mean, I did one big deal, but then after that, you know, there were ups and downs. And let's not forget, I just lost everything. So I have to start from scratch. And so financially, I was under tremendous stress, but at the same time, I was so hungry to learn. So no matter what environment I was put in, because you asked me, you know, what else did you do as training? I was investing like crazy in learning, and not only learning the skill of real estate, but being better as an individual and my mindset.
Yeah.
Uh, recently you interviewed Sana from PMML. It was a beautiful piece, and it was so nice to see. I mean, I know them personally. They're great human beings, and we do share that in common. When I first started, they were big, but they weren't who they are today. And we have this Tony Robbins and all this personal development thing in common, and that's what I discovered. And I would say that without a doubt completely transformed who I was and how I was going to get out of the deep hole I was in, just with the mindset of saying, Aline, like, that's the past. And I'm not saying that mindset changed overnight. I still have these thoughts, and I still have to work on that. And I still meditate every day to make sure that I control that mind. But it was key. And I was spending money on development for myself when I didn't have a dollar to be doing that. And a lot of people around me thought, what is she doing? She's nuts. But I think investing in ourselves is so fundamental, because after that, you can do whatever. If you believe,
if you feel confident. And that's one thing. It's funny because you bring up the Sana interview last week. I remember starting in real estate, people telling me like, oh, you'll see, like you're obsessed about learning and knowledge and all that. And it's very important and get educated, but it's really 20% technical knowledge and 80% mindset. And I used to think like, yeah. It's always easy for people who are much further down the path in the spiral of development to say that. And I feel like it's true. It's very true. Like, yeah, you need to know stuff about zoning and letal and financing and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's really just based on if you think you can do it and you keep pushing ahead and the perseverance and the positive mindset, you can almost achieve anything you want.
Yeah, that's very true. And one of my favorite, I mean, in university, I'm going back to 90, when I started university, it was 95. Many people watching weren't even born. Some of your audience might not have been.
Come on.
We're talking 95. We're talking 28 years ago. I mean, there are young investors out there, and it's really cool. I mean, my youngest investor when I first started, he was 23 at the time, or was he maybe even 21, perhaps 21. And today he has 2 properties. He didn't want to go bigger than that, but he's got 2 properties. He's super happy with that. Anyways, I digress. But you're right. When I was in university, one of the studies that we did, or case studies, was on Richard Branson, and he always said, like, it's about surrounding yourself with the right people. You don't have to know everything. But I wanted to learn, and I had to learn so that I started being credible. So I started taking courses, MREX, Collège Immobilier, you name it. And investments, again, anyone who knows the mentorship program at the Collège Immobilier and all that, these are not cheap programs.
No.
But I wasn't doing them when I had the money. I was doing them and being tight elsewhere. I mean, you don't even want to know the horror stories about being tight. I remember my Videotron light going blank once, and I said, oh, shoot, we have another power failure. And then I was like, but the lights are on. And I was like, oh, the bill that's not paid.
We haven't paid. Yeah. That's the hard reality.
Yeah. So that was then. And I'm not saying it's an easy ride, because real estate, is for investors, brokers, anyone who's in it, it is cyclical. It is not a straight line that no matter what you are up. You just have to look at the state of the market right now in the US. There are massive players that are foreclosing on properties right now. So because you own real estate, or that you have made it as a broker, that's it, like you're safe forever. Absolutely not. It's a continuous game. However, and that's why I'm so grateful. And I can't remember who I was speaking to about this whole franchise. I wish I knew the person, because this person opened a door to me that I can thank him for. The world of commercial real estate and of investing in real estate completely transformed my life. So that client that I started looking for multi-investment directed me towards, okay, I'm going to focus on multi-res, and I'm going to learn everything I can. And I was learning it from the best in the student housing environment. And I said, okay, let me understand how this works,
Yeah. And then you were basically drinking from a watering hose.
Yeah. And I was doing that because I was so passionate about helping others. I wanted to be the best for my clients. I could bring them value. I could understand what was doing. I was going to tell them things that others maybe didn't know.
Mhm.
And I got involved in deals way beyond the deal. I would go on the site, the construction site after, because, many brokers, you sell a deal, but you have no idea what the finished product is, what
No,
it's
and
going to.
they just want to do the transaction and then they walk away. They never come back on site. Past the notary, it's not their problem. Mhm.
And I don't know if it's my own style or the fact that as a kid, I wanted to be an architect. I mean, if I had done the real deal and the dream thing, it was architecture, McGill, and that was the path. It didn't happen that way. But I love, you put me in a steel construction hat and steel cap boots. I am
Yeah.
happy. Send me on a construction site. Yeah.
You came into real estate a little bit later in your life. You had a previous career before. You spent a lot of time investing in yourself. And at the event last week, we had a lot of young people. Like, it's kind of a twofold question of how how has real estate enhanced your life having started a bit later? And what advice would you give to people who are super young and getting into it right now?
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt. I wish I had discovered real estate when I was in my 20s. There's
Mhm.
no doubt about it. I was in the corporate world. This is not where we invested. When you started making money, you put safe money in your RSPs. You bought your own condo to live in, perhaps, and then you did a bit of mutual funds and stocks, and that's. But real estate was not my world. So when I see younger people understanding this, are you kidding me? My own nephew, who was 18, who's talking to me about real estate.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 17 and said to me, well, one day I'd like to have passive income. And I said, I learned that term in my 40s. Like, how did you
Exactly.
know that? So I think it's phenomenal because if it is well used, and when I say well used, is that wealth to me is a gift and a responsibility. So when there's that saying, when you get, you give, when you learn, teach. I'm a big believer in those principles. And so real estate is a incredible wealth creator. And that's what I discovered myself getting into the game, not necessarily as an investor, because again, because of my financial situation, I was not capable of getting into the game myself. However, I was helping others and very successfully helping others and helped a lot of people make lots of money. But I also saw what life it created for them, whether it's the older generation that had held on to real estate for years and I was now selling their assets. But you hold on to a building downtown Montreal for 50 years, I'll tell you, the numbers.
Yeah.
So it changes one's life, the possibilities it creates, what it does for your families, what you can give back to your community. So I get super excited when I see young people interested, willing to sacrifice. We just did a survey with Royal LePage, and I was very blessed because they asked me to be their spokesperson for Quebec. But one of the things that stood out is how much the young kids are willing to sacrifice being owners themselves to live, to own instead, and they will be tenants, but they will rent out their properties
Yeah.
for the future gains. And that is smart thinking. Now, our parents, they meant well, but this is not how they thought. They thought, and my mother, I remember when I was leaving the house, I was, in my mind, I'm going to rent. She said, no, you're going to own. Okay. And I did. And I bought myself a great condo before the Sud-Ouest became what it was. I was down there on Charlevoix. And I thank her for that. But her mindset was you buy to live in it so that you
Yeah.
don't put your money away
It
in
was a
rent.
very different mindset.
Right. Whereas today, I mean, some of my younger investors, they are still tenants, but they rent out their properties and their properties are being paid.
Mhm.
And that is not something that I was taught. So
Yeah.
that's why I get excited for younger, because look, it's very simple. When you've got time in front of you, like any kind of investment, this is where that your probabilities are much greater, right? You're going to
Yeah.
have a lot more potential. There's no guarantee, but it helps. Time is usually in one's favor financially.
Absolutely. And it's one of the well, it's the compounding, and then it's also the beautiful thing about real estate is that it forgives overtime. If you feel like you've overpaid 20K 3 years down the road, 10 years down the road, who cares, right? None of this really matters. So
Certainly,
I
with the low interest rates that we have had in the last decade,
yeah,
it's like the money was free,
it's
essentially.
peanuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned before we finish, you know, as you go on, it almost becomes less and less. It's less and less about the money. It's more and more about giving back. And I was having a conversation with a city north of Montreal, in which I'm going to be submitting a project and letting them know that as an immigrant, I want to create housing. And they kind of looked at me and they're like, "Oh, well, this is great. This is usually not what we hear." What have you been noticing with your maybe I was going to say slightly older clientele, the investors that are more accomplished, that have done more in their life? How do they approach that? Because at the point that they're at, they don't need another building. It's not what it's about.
It's funny because I'm having this conversation. I'm actually creating a mastermind with 4 or 5 investors. Um, I don't think any of them are over 40. And they are very concerned about the social housing situation and the housing crisis. So I'm not saying the older generation doesn't care. Absolutely not. It is an issue, and what I think is important, I kind of compare this to offsetting the carbon footprint. When you buy a plane ticket, you can offset your carbon footprint. When you buy certain things, you can do the same, right? I feel that as investors, there's a responsibility that, yes, we're going to buy a property. We're going to optimize it. We're going to increase the rents. There are some people that are going to have to move. Some people are going to come back and they're going to say, listen, you just gave me a beautiful apartment. I'm coming back. But some people will not. And some people will not be able to afford another place of that price point. So I think there's a responsibility to build and to create housing for these people. This is a collective. If we keep thinking that we live in silos and I'm going to create wealth and I'm happy, and then I've got my neighbor who is not, this is not a way to continue to build healthy societies. So, I get excited when I talk to investors that at the same time I can be talking about $1 million deal and helping them make lots of money, and they're going to use some of that money and they're going to say, okay, we're going to invest this and we're going to create. So, and here's the thing, I think there is so much room for this. Everybody can be doing this. I applaud you for doing this. I applaud us for doing it. There's a huge group that is starting to get created with big players. Group Mac is getting involved. There is a massive, because again, we can't always and want to rely on our cities to do these kinds of things. They've got enough
They
on their.
don't. They're not doing it anyways.
And this is not what they do. Let's just face it. Construction, building, they can build bridges, they can build hospitals. This is what
Well,
but that's what they're there for. They're there for the infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
But the housing and everything that is much more entrepreneurial, let it be done by those who know how to do it and who do it for profit. So that means on a social scale, they will still make it as efficient as possible. And I'm excited. The more people are going to get involved in this solution, the better it's going to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I'm totally down with that. And I'm making it more and more my mission now. So, you said just as a closing note here, you said you were approached for Royal LePage to be the spokesperson for Quebec
For this particular study. So if you go on right now, I mean, yesterday it was really fun. LCN interviewed me. They picked up the piece. Royal LePage, you'll notice we're not very big on ads. You don't see advertising. You won't see billboards on but what we are specialists at, and Phil Soper, who's our CEO, is press releases and data on the market. So we just released a study nationwide around residential investments. And it's super encouraging. It's encouraging because in Montreal, just to say, Montrealers, we have almost double the number of investment properties, 3 or more properties than the rest of Canada. What does that look like? That means that 14% of investors in Montreal have 3 or more, Canada 8%. Why? Because the price of a house, if you want to own a house and rent it out, And again, we weren't talking about cottages, Saint-Sauveur and all that. The study went, if I'm not mistaken, up to in the north, Saint-Jérôme kind of area. We didn't go all the way into cottage land. So it's not about secondary homes, but people that own a home duplex for rental. Our prices, a house in Montreal, the median price is 600,000, a little bit more. Toronto is 1.4 and Vancouver is 1.6.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a disposable income and salaries. You know, we talk about prices, but salaries aren't double in Vancouver from an executive in Montreal. So we have a lot of opportunity. You know, we like to complain, we like to be whiners and saying, poor us. Well, no, we have it. We have a great situation. And that's the study that we recently did. So I invite people, if they're curious, I mean, you go online and you'll find it. I wrote a blog on it. And it's just encouraging stats on how to start getting into the market. And not everybody gets in with their first 5-plex and 6-plex. I mean, the big developer that I'm talking to you about, I don't want to name his name for his own privacy, but he started with a condo when he was a student. That's how he started. And he just hit 40. So, you know, the only thing I would say to young people that are listening is not to have this sense of panic. And it's a day-by-day process. Just enjoy the process, have fun, and trust me, you'll get there. You'll get there if you're doing the steps every day.
It's funny to hear you say that in terms of, oh, you said he's just 40, because I don't remember who it was, but I had this very conversation with someone last week of like, oh, but I want to do this and I want to do that and this. And I was like, slow down. You have the rest of your life. You're barely 20 years old. It's okay. Like it's a marathon. It's not about rushing. Just buy one property per year for the next 10 years. You'll be ahead of 99% of Canadians by the time you're 30. And all this. So you're right. Like time is on our side. Time is the essence of what we do. In certain cases, when it's a construction project, I kind of try to rush, but it's a different animal. Aline, thank you very much for joining today. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out?
Well, look, Aline Zafirian, I have a not very common name. So if you go on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you'll find me. I'd be happy to connect. I love advising. There you go. I really love advising. I was very fortunate that people and they still do. You know, they're so open of giving me help and advice and mentoring. And so I love giving back. And if I can help someone who's starting, without being their broker, I don't need to be their broker. I just want to see people thrive. And that gets me excited.
Good stuff. Well, if anyone listening wants to reach out to Aline, go for it. Give her a phone call, have some questions, and she will be available for you. So to everyone listening, thank you very much. Again, share this episode with a friend who's in the Montreal region or not. And stay tuned. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you very much, Aline, for your participation today.
Thank you for what you're doing, Axel. It's really great that you're being able to use your platform to help a lot of people. So congrats to you too. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's fun. And those conversations keep me going. So awesome. Talk to you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.